Long before there were hospitals, long before there were pharmacies, long before a single synthetic molecule had ever been designed in a laboratory and pressed into a pill, human beings were healing themselves. They were doing it with what they grew, what they gathered, what they prepared with their hands and placed on the table in front of their families. They did not have a name for what they were doing. They did not have peer-reviewed journals to validate it. But encoded inside the biology of every plant food they consumed were compounds that spoke directly to the human body at the level of its most fundamental operating system, the genome. And your genome has not forgotten that language. This is the part of modern nutritional science that I find most profound, most humbling, and most urgent to communicate. We live in an era that has convinced itself that healing is something that happens in a clinic, that the body's repair systems need to be activated from the outside, by external intervention, by a prescription written on a notepad and filled at a counter. And I understand why we believe this. The achievements of modern medicine are real and they are extraordinary. But somewhere in the rush toward pharmaceutical solutions, we abandoned something that took 3 billion years of evolution to build: the relationship between food and the human gene. Nutrigenomics is the science of how specific compounds in food interact directly with your DNA. Not metaphorically, not in a general wellness sense, literally at the molecular level. Bioactive compounds found in whole foods bind to receptors on the surface of your cells, enter the nucleus, and alter which genes are expressed and which are silenced. They can switch on genes that produce antioxidant enzymes. They can suppress genes that drive inflammatory cascades. They can activate the precise genetic pathways that instruct brain cells to survive, to regenerate, and to form the new connections that are the physical substrate of memory itself. Luteolin, a flavonoid found in specific leafy green vegetables, has been shown in published research to inhibit neuroinflammation by blocking the activation of microglial cells, the immune cells of the brain, that when chronically overactivated, begin to damage the very neural tissue they were designed to protect. This is not a supplement. This is not an extract manufactured in a facility and sold in a bottle. This is a compound that exists naturally in food that your body recognizes at the genetic level, that your ancestors consumed for thousands of generations, and that your brain is still right now waiting to receive. DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, is the omega-3 fatty acid that comprises roughly 30% of the fat in your brain's cerebral cortex. Your body cannot manufacture adequate amounts of it on its own. It must come from food. And when it arrives, it does not simply sit passively in the membrane of your neurons. It activates gene expression pathways that upregulate BDNF production, strengthen synaptic connections, and reduce the inflammatory signaling molecules that accelerate cognitive aging. The research on DHA and brain health spans decades, crosses dozens of countries, and involves hundreds of thousands of study participants. The signal is not subtle. The food your brain most needs to rebuild itself is a food that humans have been eating from the ocean and from certain plants for as long as we have existed. Anthocyanins, the compounds responsible for the deep blue, purple, and red pigmentation in certain berries, do something that very few dietary compounds can do. They cross the blood-brain barrier. Most molecules circulating in your bloodstream cannot access your brain directly. The blood-brain barrier exists precisely to prevent that, to protect the delicate neurochemical environment inside your skull from the chaos of general circulation. But anthocyanins pass through, and once inside, they activate the NRF2 pathway, a master genetic switch that turns on the body's own internal antioxidant defense system, reducing oxidative stress in brain tissue and protecting neurons from the damage that accumulates invisibly over decades of living. Most people walking into a doctor's office today believe the same thing. They believe that at a certain age, the mind simply begins to fade, that forgetting names, losing words mid-sentence, walking into a room and standing there confused, that all of this is simply the cost of getting older. They have accepted it. They have been told to accept it. And that acceptance, I want to tell you today, is one of the most dangerous things happening in modern medicine. Because here is what the science actually says. Your brain is not breaking down, it is not surrendering, it is not running out of time. What your brain is doing, what millions of brains around the world are doing right now, silently, invisibly, is starving. And there is a profound difference between a brain that is broken and a brain that is hungry, because a hungry brain can be fed. The human brain consumes roughly 20% of everything your body produces in terms of energy. 20%, and yet it stores almost none of it. It cannot hold reserves the way your muscles can, the way your liver can. It depends entirely on a continuous, uninterrupted supply of nutrients delivered through the bloodstream, hour by hour, meal by meal, day by day. The moment that supply becomes inadequate, the moment the quality of what you are eating begins to fall below what your neurons need to fire to communicate, to repair themselves, the brain begins to struggle, and the first thing you notice is memory. The first thing that slips is the sharpness, the recall, the ability to hold a thought long enough to act on it. Now, here is where the research becomes extraordinary. We have known for decades that the brain has a remarkable capacity called neuroplasticity, the ability to form new connections, to rewire itself, to recover function that seemed lost. What we are only now beginning to fully understand is how dramatically food controls that process. Not supplements, not synthetic compounds. Actual whole foods, consumed in the right combinations, have the power to switch on the genes inside your brain cells that govern repair, regeneration, and growth. During sleep, specifically during the deep slow-wave sleep that your body enters in the first hours of the night, your brain activates a system called the glymphatic network. This is essentially your brain's overnight cleaning crew. Channels open between the cells, cerebrospinal fluid rushes through, and the toxic proteins that accumulate during a day of thinking and living, including the amyloid beta proteins directly linked to cognitive decline, are flushed away. But this process does not happen equally in every person. It is not automatic in the way we once assumed. The efficiency of your glymphatic system, the depth of your slow-wave sleep, the very architecture of your overnight brain repair, all of it is profoundly shaped by what you ate before that night began. Specific bioactive compounds found in whole foods directly prime this system. They reduce neuroinflammation, the low-grade chronic brain inflammation that silently degrades memory over years. They stimulate the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is the protein your brain uses to build new neural pathways. They protect the blood-brain barrier, that critical membrane that decides what enters your brain and what stays out. They feed the gut microbiome, which communicates with your brain through the vagus nerve in ways that directly regulate mood, focus, and recall. This is not a theory on the edges of science. This is published, peer-reviewed, replicated research coming out of the world's leading neuroscience institutions. And what it tells us is something that should change the way every single person in this room thinks about dinner tonight. There is a moment that happens every single night in every single human body that modern neuroscience is only now beginning to fully appreciate. It is not dramatic. You are not awake for it. You do not feel it happening. But approximately 90 minutes after you close your eyes and drift into deep sleep, your brain undergoes a shift so powerful, so precisely engineered by millions of years of evolution, that no pharmaceutical compound we have ever developed comes close to replicating it. Scientists call this phase slow-wave sleep. And what happens inside your brain during this window is nothing short of biological reconstruction. Most people think of sleep as rest, as the absence of activity, as the body powering down so it can be ready for the next day. This is one of the most widespread and costly misconceptions in all of modern health. Sleep is not the absence of work. Sleep is when the most important work happens. While you lie still, while your muscles relax and your breathing slows, your brain is more metabolically active in certain ways than it is when you are sitting at your desk solving problems. It is doing the work that waking life simply does not allow. It is doing the work that determines whether you wake up sharp or foggy, whether your memory holds or slips, whether your brain at 60 looks biologically like a brain at 40 or a brain at 70. During slow-wave sleep, the brain triggers the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor BDNF. I want you to think of BDNF as fertilizer for your neurons. When levels are high, your brain grows new connections. It strengthens the pathways between existing neurons. It consolidates the memories you form during the day, moving them from short-term storage into long-term architecture. When BDNF levels are low, when your sleep is shallow, interrupted, or chemically suppressed by poor food choices, that consolidation fails. Those memories do not transfer. That learning does not stick. And over time, the cumulative loss is staggering. At the same time, a parallel process is unfolding. The glymphatic system, the brain's internal waste clearance network, opens its channels during deep sleep in a way that it simply cannot do while you are awake. The cells of the brain actually shrink slightly, creating space between them, and cerebrospinal fluid surges through those spaces like a pressure wash. It carries away the metabolic waste products of a full day of thinking. It carries away inflammatory compounds. It carries away the misfolded proteins, including amyloid beta and tau. that when allowed to accumulate over years and decades are directly implicated in the destruction of memory and cognitive function. This is your brain cleaning itself, and it can only do this work during that deep, slow wave window. Now here is the part that changes everything. Here is the part that the research has made undeniably clear over the last decade of serious scientific investigation. The depth of that slow wave sleep, the efficiency of your glymphatic flush, the robustness of your BDNF release, the completeness of your memory consolidation is not fixed. It is not simply determined by how tired you are or how many hours you spend in bed. It is exquisitely sensitive to the chemical environment inside your body when you go to sleep. And that chemical environment is built brick by brick from what you eat.